My brain is melting because Joe just gave like a 3-hour presentation in 35 minutes. What I love about skucamp is this highly tactical approach that we've taken where people get up and are vulnerable and they're talking about their successes and what they're doing, and I really, really appreciate that. And I think it's amazing to see how just different salespeople build their portfolios. What Joe does is different what Nick does and is maybe different from what Brenda does. But I think that what unifies us all and unites us all is this energy and this curiosity to do well. Anyways, moving right along, I would like to introduce Jamie Watson, who is a return skucamp speaker. Jamie spoke at skucamp Palm Springs, our first skucamp a couple of years ago, and nailed it from a finance perspective. And we said, Jamie, we want you to come back and talk about compensation, which is, for some people, maybe terrifying. For other nerds in the group, maybe something they really love. But Jamie is an authority. Jamie has a background in finance and has done a lot of advising of distributors and suppliers when it comes to compensation models. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jamie Watson.
Thank you. Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm a certified marketing consultant, and we've been in this industry since 1981, and I've been in this industry since 2006, so kind of a while. I am 40. People don't believe that I am 40, but I am 40. I do kind of know some things. So anyway, so this is a really important topic in the industry. The presentation is written more from a distributor standpoint. However, a lot of the principles do apply to all industries and all sides of the industry. And when Bobby approached me about talking about this, I thought it was a great idea because the compensation aspect on the distributor financial statement is the biggest number on the statement. So we need to have more of a conversation on what that means and what it looks like, because traditionally everybody's always done things a certain way, and that's changing. Our culture is changing and the numbers are changing, so it's time to make a shift. So let's move forward. It does work. So before we start, there is no magic formula to this. What's important is that when you work on your compensation model, that you do it thoughtfully, that you're transparent about it, that you're constantly reevaluating it. But we've seen a lot of compensation models succeed and fail based on how they're implemented. And the following presentation is just a compilation of what we've seen over the years and what can work and some things to avoid, and so let's move forward and look at that. All right, so we're going to start from the bottom, the foundation. We have 3 different basic ways of compensating people. We have a full commission, which is, and I swear when you come to these things and you speak, you have to swear at least once when you're on stage. So this is the basic bitch way to compensate your salespeople. And I'm sorry, I'm a little weird Marco Rubio up here, but I have had a cold and I'm trying not to cough. I haven't coughed in like 7 minutes, so we're doing good. So this is traditionally, the full commission's been the traditional way of compensating salespeople. We see this a lot because we work with a lot of companies where the owners are retiring. So the companies have been around for a long time, and this is the way that everybody used to do it. And so we do see it a lot, although there is a shift in the industry. The salary. This is used in more of an agency or an inside sales role. This is not necessarily one that's used often, but we're still going to cover it a little bit just so that we get a little bit a taste of that. And then there's commission and salary, which gives you kind of the best of both worlds in terms of the strengths and weaknesses of these compensation plans. And this one's becoming more relevant and more accepted in our industry. And I am going to leave a little bit of time at the end, hopefully, for questions. But if you have questions as we go through it, please feel free to ask them, because there are going to be a lot of numbers up here, and I want to make sure everybody understands all aspects of it. So full commission, there's a lot of stuff up here, and I'm just going to cover it and, again, ask questions as we go. So historically, this is what we've seen. The 50-50 split, it works pretty well if you're dealing with independent contractors, but in this day and age, independent contractors are becoming less and less of a thing. More people are doing employees and offering benefits because that's more of the demand. But if you are going to use this, know that 50-50 split with employees does not work. It is too much when you have payroll taxes and benefits on top of the 50-50 split. If you're going to do something like that, you want to do more of a 40-60 split when you have employees. So again, this is more of the basic package that people used to offer. And the current trend in full commission is that there's a tiered commission structure which incentivizes salespeople to sell at a higher margin, because margins are absolutely king in this industry. And I want to make that point, although it doesn't really deal with just compensation. But if you're selling at a 25% margin and you think, I just need to sell enough to cover my basic expenses, it will not work. It won't work. You can't sell a 25% margin and think that all of your other expenses are not going to increase as well. Margins are king in this industry. 25 is too low. Does anybody know the average margin in the industry? 35. 35 is right. Somebody over here said it. 35% is good. Above that's better. Below it's, if you get below 30, you're getting into the danger zone. That's when we see a lot of people acquiring debt and financing the business through shareholder loans. Anyway, going back to the commission, the advantages of the full commission are obvious. It empowers and motivates your salespeople. You eat what you kill, that sort of thing. And it reduces your fixed overhead and it ties your profitability to your productivity. The disadvantages are also pretty obvious. It's hard to attract and retain talent, especially the millennials and people that are expecting, benefits and that sort of thing. And somebody, if you have somebody that has a book of business and they want a 50-50 split, that might work for them. But if you have somebody new who's not in the industry, a 50-50 split's not really going to work because they're not going to make enough money to survive in the first few years. So, hard to attract and retain talent. Sometimes it's too simple. Maddie and I had this conversation a little earlier where different types of commission, different splits on different types of orders. You need, when you have some sort of like inventorying or that sort of thing, you have more costs associated with those orders. So if you pay somebody a 50-50 split on those orders, you actually lose money as a company. So sometimes it can be too simple. The biggest disadvantage though, is the ownership of your clients. Independent contractors on a 50-50 split, they own the clients. They own the clients. If they leave, they can take the clients with them, and that's it. Then your clients are out the door. So this is the biggest disadvantage, and that's just the key fundamental of an independent contractor relationship. And then if the split is too high, it can be detrimental to profitability. And I'm going to show you an example right here. If you are doing a 50-50 split, this will be very helpful in making sure your company stays profitable. Beware, there's numbers coming up. Okay, so Company X's policy is a 50-50 split with an independent contractor, but they have a 17.5% minimum that goes to the house. So here's how that would work. And you can see this is basically the same order at 3 different margins. And so at the 30%, they're going to keep 17.5% of that sale. And what does that do for the company? It keeps the lights on, basically. It keeps the lights on, it pays the rent, it covers some expenses for support staff and that sort of thing. And then the independent contractor gets $1,250. It is a 50-50 split with a certain minimum that the house keeps. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions on that? Never heard it, love it, awesome. And then you can see as it goes up how obviously at 35%, that's your basic 50-50 split, and then 40%, you're obviously doing very well there. So that's full commission. Pretty simple for the most part. Now we have a salary fixed compensation, and I'm not going to include an example of this because it's pretty straightforward. But it's seldom used in the traditional distributor setting, and it's more used when you have an agency type of setting. So you have like a group of people working on a client together. And so everybody's paid more of a salary in that. And sometimes there's a bonus or something on top of it, but that's when it's usually used. It can also be used if you have somebody starting in as a sales career and you want to give them a salary at the very beginning of their career and then transition them into more of a commission sort of structure. So there's that. And here's something, and this is just a tip, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with this specific structure, but when you have salespeople out there selling, pay the commission on an initial order, and then transition that customer to an inside person, because how many salespeople really like details and are really good at details? Not very many. They're really good at selling, and they're really good at relationships. So not that you don't have to be somewhat good at details, but turn that customer over to an inside person, have that inside person manage that relationship, and have the inside person manage those details, and now you have 2 points of contact at the company, 2 different relationships. So if the salesperson does end up leaving, you still have somebody with a relationship at the company. It also frees up the salespeople to go out and do what they're best at. There's a little bit of a delay. All right. So it can be helpful in attracting the new talent, somebody new to the industry, and it's really predictable and it's really stable. Obvious advantages. Disadvantage, the biggest disadvantage is not incentive-based. If you don't hire the right person and they're not a self-starter and they just sit on the salary and they don't work very hard, then you lose money on them. And it doesn't foster any sort of accountability. So it takes a certain sort of environment, like I said, an agency type of environment, certain type of culture for this to work. And it also creates that fixed expense where if for some reason you start to lose volume, you have to lay people off sooner. And what I've seen is that people aren't willing to do that. So you end up having a lot of overhead and end up losing money. The other thing is, if you start somebody on a salary and you don't transition them so that they're being paid market value in the industry, they're going to leave and go to somebody else when they hear or see something else that they like. Not that you should just be hiring salespeople based on price, because how many people think it's a good idea to get your customers just based on price? No. It's not a good idea to just get your salespeople on price either. There's always going to be somebody out there that's paying more. So an important element of this, which I can't cover because I don't have enough time, is culture. And everybody understands culture. That's an important ingredient in the recipe here. We can't go too far into it, but price is not going to get you anywhere when it comes to customers. It's not going to get you anywhere when it comes to salespeople. You have to have that other ingredient too. So here's the one that I think is becoming more and more popular and accepted in the industry. It's the salary plus commission. So it's kind of creating the situation where you have the motivation, but you also have the, stability of the salary. And what's important is to use a minimum profit guideline when you're figuring profitability on these. And I'm going to show you an example next that you'll see that. And obviously, if you live in California or you live in Texas, you have 2 different standards of living. So the salary component is going to change based on where you live. That's just the obvious part of the equation. I live in Indiana. It doesn't cost very much to live in Indiana. The salary portion would be pretty low, but if I lived in California, it would be much different. But we're going to show you an example that can just illustrate how this could work. And it can also be adjusted as a newer salesperson gains experience. Maybe you start with a larger salary, and then you taper it to a lower salary just because they're gating a book of business. So here's an example of how this can work. And I actually stole this from Catherine. So this is right sleeves compensation plan, right, Catherine? Is that correct? Ish. She's looking at it like, I don't know, I can't see it. But it can show you how you have your gross sales, and then this is figuring a 40% margin, which is great. 40% margin is fantastic. And then you see there's a base salary across the board at $40,000, and then you also have the commission on top of that at 10% of the gross margin. So then you have your total earnings for the salesperson now. The total earnings is a salesperson line of $45,000, and you see what the house gets is $5,000. Now that house line is really important, and I think a lot of people don't pay enough attention to it. Everybody's looking at what's the salesperson getting, and that's really important. But what is the house getting? And you can see in the first year, if you figure that there's about 10% cost on overhead, you're actually investing in that person in the beginning. But then you can see as you go on in the book of business builds that it's more and more profitable over time. Does anybody have any questions on this? Danny? I'll repeat it.
Does it make sense at all to, over time, if you look at the base salary at $40,000, to actually wean the salesperson down to a lower salary and
Sure.
enhance the commission rate?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying, and I think it's actually on the next slide. Let me look. Yeah, decreasing salary over time while increasing percentage of commission right there. You're just a little ahead of me. So yeah, there are other versions that you can do. You can decrease the salary, as Danny was saying. You can do a sliding scale commission, where the commission actually gets more and more as the volume increases. Or you can do a sliding scale commission, and I like this version the most, actually, where you're paying a salary, but then you're still incentivizing them to increase their commission as the gross profit percentage increases. Let me say that again. You increase the commission percentage as gross profit increases as well. So maybe you're paying 35% commission on a 35% margin, and 40% commission on a 40% margin. Does that make sense? That's what I like the most, because I think that margins are just so very important to the profitability of a distributorship that I think that one is a really strong option. So so when you're paying the commission, you want to do so after you figure the profit. So here's another option. It's just another example where you start with your gross sales and you have your margins at 40%. And obviously this is going to change if your margins are lower or higher. But you have your base salary of $40,000, and then you have your profit. So your profit after the base salary is $10,000. And then you have a sliding scale based on what remains after you apply a 10% overhead. I really like this from a financial perspective, but for salespeople, this can be really complicated to understand. That's the reason that the other option is probably better. But if you have a situation where you really do want to base it on profitability, you can use this option. I just think I was trying to go back to the other example. I think this example is a little simpler. Okay, I don't know what's happening. Johanna, I feel your pain. Here we go. Yeah, this example is just a little bit simpler. Well, it's a lot simpler, but it just depends on what you want to do. Like I said, there is no absolute 100% secret formula. I don't want to stand up here and tell you to do one thing over the other. I just think that as long as you do it thoughtfully, you can be successful. So let's go back to advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so salary plus commission obviously offers the best of both worlds of both of the previous plans. The security and incentive, but also the incentive to perform. It works well with different personality types, which is great, and because we all know that there are a lot of personality types and a lot of different generational types. And this is really important too. Although this is becoming more and more accepted, it's not widespread yet, so this is really unique. You're offering salary to a salesperson and commission on top of that, they're gonna love it, and they're not gonna be able to find it everywhere. So you're more likely to be able to retain your salespeople if you offer something like this. And the key tip, and it's kind of key, but it's just offer enough salary for the salesperson to feel comfortable meeting their basic financial needs in the community, but then enough, but not so much that they're not motivated to go out and sell more. You know, enough that they're comfortable, but then they still have that edge where they want to get out there and really find some good leads. And then there's disadvantages. There's still an element of fixed overhead, but in this day and age, you kind of have to invest in your people in order for your people to want to invest in being part of your company. But it does have an element of fixed overhead, which you need to watch when you lose sales volume. And some versions can be difficult to understand, like I was saying earlier. So, like I said, there is no one thing that works for everybody, but I did just kind of want to cover a few principles on some things that are important, and these are basic principles of compensation. And the first one is goal alignment between the company and the salesperson. What is your ultimate goal? Profitability, volume, is it higher gross margins? What are your ultimate goals, and are you communicating those to your salespeople? And is the way that you're compensating them mirroring those goals? So goal alignment between the company and the salesperson is really very important. Transparency is also very important, and this is one that it kind of touches home with me because I used to work for an accounting firm, and I feel like when I wanted to discuss my compensation, it was like, oh, we shouldn't be talking about that, you know? And we're an accounting firm. We deal with money all day long, and for some reason, wanting to discuss my value in the company was like a negative thing. If your salespeople want to come to you and discuss their compensation, talk with them. Understand what they want and listen to what they're saying, and make it an open dialogue about, what are you guys doing, and just listen to what they have to say, and make sure that when you are compensating people, that you're doing so in a transparent manner so that they understand how it works, and at the end of the day, they know what's going to happen. Because if they're confused and they're frustrated, then they're going to leave. Motivational, that one's pretty simple. Make sure that you're putting together a package that motivates people, even if it's got some salary and commission, like I was saying before. Keep it, so that they're right on the edge and they're still motivated. Fiscally responsible, I can't stress this one enough. You wouldn't believe how many financial statements I look at where the salespeople are making all this money and the company owner is making absolutely nothing, or they're putting money into the business. So make sure that's fiscally responsible. Make sure that you're compensating people in a way that you can still take home something at the end of the day. And the other thing is, when you overpay your salespeople, and this is just speaking from the M&A side, the mergers and acquisitions side, when you overpay your salespeople, your company becomes virtually impossible to sell. Because what's going to happen when you go to sell your company? Whoever you sell it to is going to pay them less, and they're all going to get mad, and they're all going to leave. So if you overpay your salespeople, it's almost impossible to sell your company. So make sure you're not overpaying people just to keep them and just doing it based on price. And last, but definitely not least, is routine reevaluation. That's why we're all here, right? Is to continue reevaluating what we're doing, learn new things, and just keep the juices fresh and flowing through your head, and make sure that you're looking out for what the trends are, and you know what's going on in the market, and you're making sure everybody stays happy. And that's it. So I have left a little bit of time for Q&A. Yes.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you so much. Thank you. So since we don't have much time for Q&A, Jamie will be around. Also, don't forget, from her slide series, we have a series of articles that have these spreadsheets out on the blog. Just hit me up if you want those. We've also had a podcast episode with Jamie before. We've got another one we're going to do soon, and we're rolling out a finance series in first quarter, so lots of material. But holler at Jamie during the break if you have any questions as well, all right? Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate that.